I wanted to actually get behind the story of purity itself.
Okay.
What is that story that you're offering that you don't see in other like bad girl books?
There's a multitude of layers to it. Ideally, the theme of purity is revenge and redemption. And it's kind of a weird, ironic take if the character's name is Purity. So really, it starts off in the 1600s, in the heat of the Salem witch trials, and even growing up, I was a history buff as a kid, and that early American civilization really fascinated me. I really loved the Salem witch trials. I thought it was a very interesting time because you could literally have a difference of opinion and someone will be like, well, this person's a witch, so kill them, and they would
Get them.
so get them. It starts off in there, and what we don't realize in the story is Margaret Adams, who is Purity, is falsely accused of murdering a baby, Samuel Todd, and people framed her for being a witch, when in reality her sister Mary is the actual witch, and she's in the opening sequence of watching her sister get hanged.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Comics Grind. I am one of your hosts, Nico Rodriguez.
And I'm Ken, aka Comic Ken on YouTube.
And thank you so much for joining us for another weekly comics discussion. This is our first recording of the new year, Ken.
Yep.
So we're ready. We're clear-headed, ready to get into the comics talk. Today we have another special guest, the first one of the new year. His name is Nick Caponi. He is a colorist / illustrator. He has some awesome credentials, some kind of more established publishers, also some indie stuff. Let's go ahead and introduce him. Nick, man.
Hello,
What's
guys.
going on,
Happy New
Nick?
Year. Happy New Year.
Happy
What's up,
New
man?
Year.
Thank you for having me. Hope everyone's well.
Yep.
Yeah, man. This is some good stuff. So for those of you watching, Ken and Nick were classmates. Am I getting that right? Over at the Kubert School a few years back?
I think I didn't teach you guys, right? Because
No.
I graduated 2016, but I currently teach there, and I've been teaching at the school for it's gonna be 5 years, and I've been working at the school for 7 years. But I can't remember if I taught maybe like briefly,
No.
like
No. You
shadowed.
were in the library when we were going.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I bet you're teaching. Are you teaching digital production now?
I teach
Yeah.
second year
Okay.
digital production. So
Dope.
I finally it was kind of I was kind of happy to hear. I was like surprised, but I was also very grateful to hear that they bumped me up a grade level, because usually for a while I would teach first year, and I love teaching my
Right.
first years. But the fact that they gave me second year, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it was weird. Like on the first day of the semester, I was like, "Oh, I know you guys. I don't even have to do my intro." So it was pretty chill. But yeah, I've been teaching there for 5 years, and primarily I teach more of the digital end of classes. For a while, I would teach
Right.
digital production. 1 year, I taught storyboarding, and then this year, I just teach digital production.
Nice.
Awesome.
So digital production, is that um does that encompass everything like art-wise digitally, or are you even talking about like video and things like that? Because when you kind of say production, there's kind of
Mhm.
seems like a bigger umbrella there.
Yeah. So production more in the sense of the comic industry and certain illustration houses. Really, what my class focuses on is a multitude of things. So, first and foremost, I do, even though we now have a solely digital coloring class, we do brush upon some color work in digital production. It also entails resizing files, focusing on DPI, making sure, pretty much prepping your file to make it a print ready. Like the printer will just take the file and print it, because
Yeah.
every printer is different, and some printers are very finicky and picky with what they want. So
Yep.
it's a class that really dives into that, and we go over, like I said, file sizes, cleaning up pages. especially from a colorist perspective, sometimes there are pages that we get that are raw scans, so which means they haven't been touched, they haven't been digitally cleaned up. There's dust speckles, there's pencil smudges. It's a mess,
Right.
and so a production job would be to go in and clean that up and make sure it's ready for the next stage. And then obviously another aspect of digital production is working digitally. We do a lot of digital drawing. I'm having my students now work on a creator owned. The semester just started, but their new project is developing a creator owned story. We're gonna do from cover, inner cover, and then 4 interior pages, and they all have
Nice.
to be to size and making sure they're in the right color mode. And so pretty much production is a multitude of things. It is kind of nicknamed the digital class because it really is. We don't touch pen and paper in that
Right.
class.
Yeah.
But so I would say it's like a multitude of things, but it's in the plethora of you know, Photoshop, Illustrator, Clip Studio.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean, that is absolutely valuable, man, because once you start getting into these things and you start wanting to print your stuff and you go and look at
Mhm.
the guidelines from a printer, you're kind of like, if you're doing it for your first time, you're kind of lost. And then, you either get, that kind of delay to get printed, is a
Oh
lot
yeah.
longer,
Mhm.
'cause you
Right.
have got to go back and forth and back and forth. But that's awesome, dude. You
Yeah,
are you
thanks.
are you
Yeah.
are doing the Lord's work for us
Yeah.
Right.
comics people.
One thing I teach, and I so um I teach something called flatting, and
Yeah.
that's a very important production gig, especially for the tail end of for a colorist. Basically, a little lecture, but basically you're making separations. So in simpler terms, it's like if I'm coloring the page, and if I want to select Spider-Man's eyes, uh, I only should be able to select Spider-Man's eyes, and that's because the page was flatted. The page was like if I need to select that black rim on his eyes, I can, and that's all thanks to flatting. And most colorists typically hire flatters. I hire flatters, and I also tell that to my students. I'm very transparent about that. I'm basically like, yeah, I know how to flat. I do the demo. I flat perfectly, but I hire people to flat because, especially when you're in a time crunch, if you're working on like like a single issue, flatting is very time consuming, and I jokingly call it grunt work, and I don't want to do it. So,
Yeah.
and I give them the open invitation that depending how well they flat, I've actually hired students during their time at the school in the past to flat. So yeah, exactly that. So if you take the ink layer off, you could see that it's still I'm able to select, say, like the sunglasses, and I'm able to select
Right.
the vest, like certain things, because um, people don't realize when it comes to coloring, you don't just dive in and color it. There's a
Yeah.
structure to it. There's organization to it, and this makes the process a lot quicker. Now, if I were to flat and color a page, it could take me anywhere from like 4 to 6 hours. But if I get a page that's already flatted for me to work on, I could really get that page done in anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours. So it really cuts down time. And I
Right.
always say to anyone who's aspiring to be a colorist, um, it's one of the most cost-effective things I've ever spent money on. Flatting is fairly cheap depending who you use, um, but I do think it's worth it. The one thing I will say though is unless you're in a production end, because some company, I think DC's production department has people who flat, uh but if you're an indie creator or if you're on a smaller scale company, typically flatters are out of pocket through the colorist hires a flatter,
Yeah.
and so that's also like, even it goes down to pricing yourself as a colorist. You have to factor that in, you're like, all right, so say if I'm paying my flatter $10 a page, then your rate should be still your money's worth, even if you're losing $10. So the rate that someone offers you, if you incorporate a flatter in that, it's probably $10 less. So like I'm just saying for like average starting out colorist, if you're starting out saying, you're gonna color a page for $45. If you have a flatter, you're getting $35. So it's
Right.
always something to keep in mind. Um, in this industry, it doesn't pay, like flatting doesn't pay well on its own if it's like a single page, but I tell my students it adds up. One time, one of my flatters that I used, he was flatting like 4 books on rotation. So each book was like 24 pages. So it
Right.
adds up. So it's kind of like depends what you look at, how you look at it. I always tell my students it's definitely a great entry level job because a lot of colorists need flatters desperately. Even if they have one that's kind of their main flatter, they could always use another flatter on hand just in case. So I
Right.
always and one of my flatters, after flatting for a while with me, he wanted to break into coloring, and people started noticing that, or like I became too busy, so I passed on a gig to him, and he broke into coloring through flatting. So it definitely can open doors for, especially in the realm of coloring, but it definitely can open doors to opportunities.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, we'll kind of get a little bit more into that here in a second. Let's kind of go ahead and jump into the weekly grind segment of the show
Oh yeah.
where we kind of go around and we all talk about what we've done in comics this week. Mr. Ken, man, what you been up to this week?
I've, I'm up to drawing, man. Like I'm
Good.
actually my joy is starting to come back because I can actually put pencil down on paper and draw my pages again. So I've got this current page I'm working on right now.
Ooh,
Nice,
Might be a little
nice.
hard to see.
is that for Air Rider?
Yeah, for
Ooh,
issue 3.
nice.
Thank you, man.
Awesome.
So that's what I'm working on right now. I'm trying to ink it, but I feel like I'm still going like really slow in terms of the penciling and drawing phase. Like I can't do a fully rendered page in a single day yet, and I'm trying to aim for that so I can get my speed up. At the very least, 2 days. Like pencils for one day and then inks for the other day. But it depends on how complicated the page itself is and how like the needs of the page. But that's what I'm working on right now, and I think I figured out kind of a rhythm of what to do for social media. Just like I try to do everything on Saturday and Sunday, set it up for the week, and then reply as needed throughout the week. And I'm trying to get my YouTube back up again. So I've done
Oh,
like 3 videos so far. They're doing pretty well, and yeah, that's pretty much what my week has been like.
Nice, nice. So you said Saturdays you're doing like what did you say you're preparing on Saturdays? You're doing a lot of your drawing and stuff for the week on Saturdays, or you're
Uh,
preparing your social stuff for Saturday on Saturday?
my content for the week. So like I'll make a whole bunch of Twitter posts. I'll use like art that I've done in the past or art that I'm creating now and show like work in progress or things about or post about stuff that I like cartoons and whatnot, and just schedule out the post for the week and then try to make some of them kind of promotional for like a newsletter and that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. That's good stuff, man. Good stuff. How about you, Nick? What have you been up
I
to in comics this week? I'm gonna run off screen and grab something real quick, but I'll be right back, man.
Okay.
Tell us what you got going on.
I've been, well, one of them I signed an NDA on, but I could say like what company it's for. I've been doing cards for Upper Deck, and
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah, I can't, unfortunately I can't say what IP they're from, but it's something I grew up watching. I'll leave it there.
Nice.
Uh I'm doing that.
Ninja
Then
Turtles.
I'm also doing layouts for issue 2 of my book Purity.
Mhm.
In the process of that, I just got the photo today from my distributor in Oregon. His name's Adam Watson. He sent me photos that issue one came in from the printers, and they look beautiful. And
Nice.
I'm very happy with the turnout. And so, really, at the end of the week, I'm going to be kind of coordinating how we're going to be starting the fulfillment process for the physical rewards.
Mhm.
And yeah, so cards, layouts, and somewhat fulfillment.
Nice.
Nice.
Thanks.
That's good stuff, man. So I guess we'll talk a little bit more about it after this, but because I'm curious into like how your whole balance is between teaching at the Kubert School with all your other projects and how that's going. Because it sounds like, dude, it sounds like your days are full of art, like
Yeah.
completely.
I always gravitate back to the school, like, a little background of my experience at the school. I've been actively going to that school since I was 14. I'm
Wow.
28 now, so it's been, quite a long time. And the one thing I noticed even when I graduated there, um, I noticed that the environment alone kind of gets you going. It kind of keeps you in that mindset. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you in that lane to get that goal. And I was very fortunate to live fairly local to the school,
Right.
so even when I graduated, there was a very small period of time, like the 2 year gap, where I did do like a part time job, and I hated it. And I thought to myself, I'm gonna go back to the school and see if there were like any teaching positions, or we have a job coordination program there as well. I try to look at some jobs through there. And that's kind of what kept me going, and even balancing work and school to this day, I think what keeps me, keeps that flame ignited is the school, like all the instructors, the president himself of the school. We're all freelancers. We've all been at the highs and the lows of the industry. We
Right.
get it. Some of us, the way our work schedule works, we might bring some work in while it's like a work period for the students, and we might bring some freelance stuff and show them as like a demo, or you know any opportunity to show students what you're working on, I've noticed is a huge positive. So it kind of gets them excited of like what can be their reality once they leave the
Right.
school. So I kind of balance it out through that. And then I I become a little more lenient over time, in a sense of, um, and I tell my students this: I do not pull all nighters. I've pulled an
Right.
all nighter twice in my life, both at the school, and I told myself I'd never do that again. I think you won't perform well if you are sleep deprived, and I've learned to, especially after a few jobs that I've worked on, I've learned to realize last year that no job is worth your health. No job is worth
Right.
like pulling all nighters. So I kind of, um, I kind of give myself like to maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock every night, and I'm like, I'm done. I don't care if the
Right.
job's not done. I'm not working past midnight. I'm not, because I'm gonna start to slump, and I'm gonna start to underperform, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
feel like shit the next day. So I always, I'm strict with that rule. I also try and keep fairly active as well. I think the last couple of years, especially, I want to say like about a year and a half ago, I hit a really bad burnout. I jumped from a really big book to another book with no breaks,
Oh wow.
and mentally it like deteriorated me temporarily. So I reeled in a little bit and focused on my health, but still keeping that, doing my best to maintain that, steady workflow. But now I realize, I could say no, because I'm the first person to say that I'm a yes man, and that's a good thing, but it's also not a good thing, because sometimes what I've learned, I've been in the industry for about 8 years now.
Right.
The one thing I've learned is, yeah, you could say yes to that job, especially when you just start out, but when you have too much on your plate and like you're expected to deliver, chances are you might crash and burn because you might not realize how much you have on your plate. So I think the school has helped me balance that out a little more. Like have that ratio of like, especially some days in the library. I also like monitor the library in the
Right.
school. So some days if it's dead in there, I bring out some of my freelance stuff and work on that until a student needs me or if
Right.
everything's in order. Um, so I try and form a balance like that because I think society in general has this like vision that all artists like have no lives, no, like they're all burnt out and tired and sleep deprived and
Hunched
unhealthy.
over.
And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. so
Right.
so yeah. So
Nice.
Gotcha, man.
mhm.
That's some good stuff there. I'm gonna keep my weekly grind segment short and sweet. Been working on proof matters, getting the prints, getting everything ready to go for printing for West Not South, my graphic novel. I'm gonna show
Sweet.
this on camera real quick. The proof came in.
Ooh,
Oh
Boom,
wow,
boom,
yeah.
that's
boom.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
a
yeah.
hardcover too?
Yep, it's hardcover.
Ooh,
But that that's
Nice.
but that's a teaser. That's a
ooh.
teaser. So yeah, so I've been working with the printer on that thing. So I got the proof in obviously. So now it's just kind of like I'm kind of going through a few things that I want to change about it, and actually some things that I need to kind of fix. But that's why you pay the money for a proof. so
Yep.
you can kind of see what everything looks like before you go off and print 1 million copies.
Oh, I
Um
agree.
Right.
I've seen people get kind of like what's it called, like trigger happy when like they have their book ready and they might not notice all like any mistakes and they just like I don't need a proof. I'm just ready to print it. And they print it and when they get it, they're like, "Oh my god, I didn't realize there's this like big error on the page or this panel wasn't
Dang.
colored." And I'm like, "That's why you get a proof."
dude,
Yeah, now
dude,
they
I
got
know.
100 book mistake and it's like, ah,
Mhm. There was a
Yeah.
Kickstarter I backed recently where um I don't know why they didn't just pull it and reprinted it or get like or if there was a way to get a refund, but like all the interior pages were upside down and I
oh
reached out
no.
to the
What
guy.
the hell?
Yeah, I know. I reached out to the guy who's a good friend of mine and I'm like, "Hey, did you look at the books before you shipped them?" And he's like, "No, I'm well aware. People reached out to me. Some of the books were like upside down, so
Dang.
I'm pretty sure he got it. He's getting it resolved." But like, that's why you get your proofs. But
See
then
Right.
that,
again, I
that
feel like proofs you could still fuck up a book. Like the printer could still fuck it up.
Yeah, and that's what I
Yeah.
was gonna say on that because it's like, if you're getting in 200, 300 copies of, say, a floppy, and they're all kind of packaged in plastic or whatever, I mean, the books that I've gotten, I've gone through maybe the first few to make sure they're good. I haven't sat there and gone through like all five, 200, whatever.
Hmm.
So like that kind of sucks if that was the case where your buddy, checked it out, everything was good, but like,
Yeah.
three more of those sacks of 50 comics were all upside down from printer error, from the actual printer doing an error. Oof,
Hmm.
man, that's crazy.
Yeah. I think it also depends on the printer you use.
Yeah.
For my one book, Reign of Ages, the writer uses Mixum. I've never had a huge issue with Mixum.
Hmm.
I think it was more so on my end. For that book, it's a lot of screen tone in black and white, and issue one was printed flawlessly, but I think um, the resolution was affected, even though I double checked the pages and they were like 600 DPI and
Right.
something's up with Mixum. Like it's still presentable, but like it's more so you wouldn't notice it unless I pointed it out kind of
Right.
error. So it's like it bugs me, but as the consumer, you're like, I don't notice, like it's fine. But like deep
Yeah.
down, I'm like, no. But and then with Purity, my other book, this is my first time using Comics Wellspring, and
Oh,
from what I saw,
I use them.
yeah, they're
same.
fantastic. And the one thing I like about them, and I don't know if this was like a COVID thing, but especially with there was like paper shortages throughout the world.
Mhm.
There was a thing with certain, like especially with the depending on the book that you do, you might have numerous variant covers, and some printers might charge you for, say if you have like 6 variant covers, uh, a printer might charge you for 6 separate print runs
Oh,
versus
wow.
versus some companies like Comics Wellspring that will literally print 600 books, and they could swap out the covers however you please, no extra charge, which I love.
Nice.
um like Mixum, yeah, like Mixum, that's the only thing I have, like the only gripe I have with Mixum is that they do that, and Mixum, the quality is great, but it's a little more expensive. The one thing I do say about Mixum versus Comics Wellspring, and the writer for Reign of Ages really narrowed it down for me, and it made sense.
Mhm.
Mixum is for anyone watching, the Mixum is a good company if you want to mass produce your book, say, and I don't mean like 500 copies, I mean like 5,000 copies, because then you're
Right.
getting your money's worth for the bulk that you get. Whereas Comics Wellspring is more cost effective for,
Smaller
fulfillment only
companies.
Kickstarters or smaller print runs. It's worth that. But if you wanted like a storage locker full of your books, I'd say go with Mixum.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nice.
Yeah, and the one thing that I've noticed with Mixum is it seems like, like Comics Wellspring is more like focused just on like comics production,
Mhm.
whereas like Mixum, it seems like they're more widespread. Like, they do brochures and like things like that, flyers and things. So it almost seems like, you know, I feel like Comics Wellspring maybe has like a little bit more of like that comic centric kind of heads, on their end.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I haven't used Mixum yet, but I have heard some of like those resolution issues some from some friends that have used them. Like they've kind of had some issues like that. So it's kind of like, I haven't
Yeah.
wanted to jump in and use them,
Yeah. And
but
then
yeah.
the other printer that people swear by, but their turnaround times are ridiculous, is Print Ninja. Granted, their turnaround times are longer because they're based out of China, and especially during the pandemic, it became almost impossible to receive your books on time, or there are people waiting not like 6 weeks, they're waiting like 6 months for their books to be printed.
Dang.
And obviously, granted, it was a COVID thing, but I feel when you start dealing with printers internationally, it does open that door for longer printing times and longer, shipping times. And
Mhm.
if you wanted to put out a book with a tighter schedule, that might not be your best option.
Right.
Right.
But they do, Print Ninja, like Comics Wellspring, has a background in comics, and like they're solely comic book oriented. So, and the quality of the books are there. I've seen some stuff printed by Print Ninja that were phenomenal. So the quality's there, but it's more so the the shipping quality is where it could be iffy.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Right.
man. They put those boxes on a boat sometimes, and by sea doesn't take no, overnightage. It takes a couple months
Yeah.
to
Right.
get ashore, but
There was I mean, granted, again, this was COVID time, but there was a board game I got off Kickstarter that was being mass produced in China. It was actually, if you're familiar with the character Lady Death, from
Yeah.
Coffin Comics,
Uh,
they had an RPG game, and I waited. Oh God, it had to be like a year and a half,
whoa.
and I think it came down to the point where, and nothing against the creators of the game or whoever's distributing, because they were very on top of things. gave us
Mhm.
updates every like 2 weeks. But it came to the point where he's the guy in charge was like, look, if anyone wants a refund, we'll gladly give you that. At this point, we can't guarantee these games come in, especially with COVID and a lot of just like the production. Apparently, I think the company that was making the game, I think obviously with COVID shut down, it was based in China, and so they were stalled, and it was a mess.
Right.
Fortunately, my game came in. It was
Nice.
fine. It was in good condition. Uh, but yeah, that's kind of, and I'm not saying like because I know a pandemic is an extreme, but I
Yeah.
feel like that's one of the many risks that one would deal with when you deal with an international printer is
Yeah.
there could be mass amounts of delays, there could be um, errors, or your thing could just straight up get lost. You'll never see it.
Right. For sure. And that's and that's really saying something when you're talking about like Coffin Comics, because they're really known for like good customer service and business
Oh,
practices.
100%. Well, the game wasn't through Coffin. It was kind of Coffin approved. This was a
Okay.
completely different uh Coffin Comics is notorious for shipping on time, fulfilling on time, and like you mentioned, the customer service is phenomenal. I've
Right.
colored for a few um I've colored for a few Coffin artists on different projects, not for Coffin,
Right.
but I always love hearing stories of how Coffin operates, how Brian Pulido operates, and every
Yeah.
single person has told me, and they were brutally honest, saying, first and foremost, Brian Pulido was the most stand-up guy you'd ever meet in this industry. He really
Nice.
cares for his artists, his creators. He doesn't cheat you. He always pays you, and he pays you the price that you deserve, not not like a low grade, bottom of the barrel price.
Right.
And Brian is very picky. Um, there were uh, there was a book I was on that Brian was kind of like overseeing. Um, I'm not gonna say which one because I don't know if this person wants everyone to fully know that. But long story short, um, he was overseeing it, and I had my encounters with Brian. He's a very awesome guy. But the one thing I do respect with Brian is that he's extremely picky, and
Right.
I respect that because I've asked my friend, I'm like, hey, can I color Hellwitch cover? Can I do? Because like my one friend does a lot of Lady Death covers and Hellwitch covers, and I'm like, can like ask Brian? I'm like, is he looking for a colorist? And he's like, he has like 3 different colorists on staff. He solely exclusively wants those colorists on
Wow.
everything. And he's like, "Don't take it personal because Brian's very picky." And from a creator standpoint, I'm the same way. Like I wouldn't wanna hire just anybody. Like if I know the team I have will sell my book, I'm gonna stick with that. And I like I said,
Right.
there was no harsh feelings. I fully respect the man. Maybe one day I'll get the little tap on the shoulder saying, "Hey, you wanna color a Lady Death cover?" And I will fall to the floor. But like I said, I do respect the decision. But going back to Coffin, Brian is pure business. He's
Right.
fully professional and he's picky, but I think for all the right reasons. So, but yeah,
Right.
I've heard every Coffin artist I've worked with has never said a single bad thing about working for Coffin. They all are treated amazing.
Right.
Mhm,
And actually I think that ties in nicely with your work here, because we have you have Purity that you're working on, and you've also
mhm.
done work for Reign of Ages. And it seems like your inspiration comes from a lot of what Coffin Comics does, but then
Mhm.
there's also that anime side that I really notice in your work, that it seems like it's got the flavor of like Totally Spies, or those
Yeah.
um those French anime cartoons that came out like in the early 2000s, like Martin Mystery and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
um
I actually
so
it's funny you mention all that. I grew up watching all of those.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like we're
I do have
we're like the
a
same age, so
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. It's funny. So I have weird um comic book exposure, upbringing, however you want to call it. I mean, growing up, obviously, I was introduced to the basics: Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men. I really, in more of the mainstream light, I'm a DC kid at heart.
Right.
I love the Bat family. Um, but and then I also on the Marvel end, I did love Spider-Man. I loved X-Men a lot. I remember as a
Hmm.
kid, but there was one time, and this is like a weird degenerate story, I'm gonna say, but it's funny, but
Go for
at
it.
the same time, you're gonna be like, so I'll never forget. I went to a comic book shop. I had to be like 10, 11, and I picked up two things. I picked up Catwoman number 12, and I
Uh-huh.
picked up this book. This was the first manga I've ever gotten in my life. And it's
All right.
called Steel Angel Kurumi. And I
What
still
the?
cherish this. Yeah, I still cherish, and mind you, I
Uh,
got this solely based on the art at the time. I did not know really what this book is about. I still really don't know what it's about because this was book 4. Um,
oh,
but I saw like a really like beautiful art, like really cool like anime character
yeah.
on the front, and I was like, all right, I got it. Lo and behold, this book was meant for like 17-year-olds, and I think one time my parents saw me read it, and there was like a suggestive scene in there. And it was just like a hot spring, like they're just sitting in the hot spring,
Of
obviously
course.
naked. And my parents like, what are you reading? And they actually confiscated that from me until like
Dang.
I took it back like 14, 15 or whatever. But
Uh-huh.
the same thing with Catwoman. I was introduced to um, Jim Balance work when I was fairly young. I feel
Hmm.
almost too young. And for those who don't know Jim Balance, he's known for his purple suit 90s Catwoman. And if anyone
Oh, okay.
remembers that, she's been given the nickname Purple Porn Star looking Catwoman, big boobed Catwoman. Uh, Pretty much this Catwoman was just pure sex appeal. But something between that and the art really captivated me at a young age. I just loved how that artist specifically drew women,
Hmm.
and it made me learn to just love the female form. I loved illustrations of women, um, whether if it was more like stylized or manga or realistic. Like there was just something so beautiful with the female form, and it really captivated me as a kid.
Right.
And yeah, like Jim, and then also too, first and foremost, Ken, I don't know if you realize this, Jim Ballon is a QB. So
Oh,
he was
really?
in the yeah, he graduated in the 80s. But the
Dope.
way he draws women were just so dynamic and fun. I really like how uh a lot of artists back in the 90s had a thing for drawing long hair on women, and I really
Oh, yeah.
noticed, especially with Jim, he would use it in the composition of the page, and it just made it flowy and cool. So there was a lot to it, but I guess at a young age, when someone's like, "Oh, you read Jim Balance stuff," that's a little suggestive there, buddy. But then as I got older, probably in my early teens, mid-teens, I started doing research. I'm like, why do I always love like female-oriented books? And
Hmm.
I guess I just love just the way that females were drawn, and I was looking a lot into like Adam Hughes' stuff, Terry Dodson stuff,
Yeah.
and then I realized there's an entire genre for those books, and it's called Bad
Right.
Girl Comics. And it really pioneered the 90s with Lady Death. Some will daringly say that Vampirella was the first bad girl art because
Oh,
it was
yeah.
like a pin-up-y character, but really
Hmm.
what revolutionized it was Lady Death, and then Billy Tucci's She, and then I think the world kind of shattered when Witchblade came out by
Oh,
Mark
yeah, yeah.
Silvestri and Michael Turner,
Right.
and people started realizing that the female form was a seller. You know, daringly, people will say sex sells. People in the industry still to this day will say that. And but even regardless what ideology or purpose the person has when they pick up those books, I guess a lot of us could collectively agree that there was something always extremely captivating with those books. Maybe there's the level of like female empowerment with the characters, like a badass sword maiden, or
Mhm.
like I said, the more sensual approach where you're like just very pretty to look at, and or like sex appeal. Like there were like a multitude of reasons, but um, I finally realized that I kind of hit my noggin at the source of the kinds of books that I liked, and they were
Right.
always very interesting to me. And especially having that anime background, I wanted to kind of, when it came to doing Reign of Ages, I
Mhm.
wanted to do something that kind of changed that narrative a little more, because I'm gonna say this in a way where I don't want to sound dickish when I say this.
Go
Um,
ahead.
uh, especially these days, I've noticed a lot of bad girl books, whether indie or mainstream. You could tell people hire like Michael Michael Turner hacks, Mark Silvestri hacks, and like respectively, some of their art is amazing. I have friends who really I'm inspired by Michael Turner especially, and I have an influence of his stuff in my purity stuff. But
Uh-huh.
you could tell that some people just want like the David Finch hack, or like the person who hasn't progressed out of the 90s, to draw their book. And look, there's nothing
Right.
wrong with that, but I felt like there's too much of it where it all just seems the same. Nothing really stood out to me.
Okay.
And with Reign of Ages, I thought to myself, when I pitched the idea to Sam Quinton, he's the writer and he's the president of Sonoma Publishing.
Right.
The way I pitched it to him, I was like, I want to do a bad girl book. I want to do a bad girl book for Sonoma, but I don't want the typical bad girl book. I want to go think of 90s Image Comics meets Love and Rockets, because I'm a huge Love and Rockets fan.
Yeah, I love
And
Love and Rockets.
yeah, Jaime Hernandez is one of like the most innovative storyteller in my arsenal of favorite storytellers. And oh, I'm jealous, man. That whole box set was like $400, I think, like on Fantagraphics site. And
Really?
I was so tempted because it was like the whole box collection from the 80s, I think, until like the 2010s. And oh, I was so tempted.
Dang.
But
Dude,
wait,
I got that for like $5.
oh,
Oh, that was
well,
That
just
one
the like
volume.
the okay, there's the one volume.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to kind of combine that because I feel no one's ever seen that before. And I
Mhm.
feel people don't expect a bad girl book to have like a cartoony look. And
Like an Archie kind of style?
yeah. And
Right.
that also too was a big influence of mine. Like Fernando Ruiz is a big influence to me,
Yeah.
especially since he like I kind of, as weird as it sounds, even as a student, I always looked at Fernando specifically as a mentor because I grew up reading a lot of Archie comics as well, and I
Right.
always loved that style, and I wanted to incorporate that style in some way. Um, but he definitely was an influence to me to the point where I feel I went to him for like just advice or like how to draw certain things. And
Right.
so I look at him as like a mentor to this day, actually, too. But
Nice.
I wanted to incorporate all of those things in this new book. And then on top of that,
I just wanted to say he was like one of my favorite teachers at the
yo,
school at the time. Like
yeah,
you
he
had
was.
to really try in his class and and put your A game in there.
Yeah, he had such, like, dry humor too, so it's like,
Yeah.
he'll say things like I feel like my like, some of my students think I do a good Fernando impression, but, like, it's all in, like, the way you raise your hand and you, like, deadpan the face, tilt your head, lower your voice register, and talk like this, and, I've done it in front of Fernando too many times, and he's like, "Is that supposed to be me? Come on."
Yeah, that's what he'll say.
But yeah, so and then like the big thing that was a little more calculated on my end when I did Reign of Ages, I intentionally
Mhm.
wanted the book to be black and white, keep it in the Love and Rockets light, but The reason
Oh,
why I
okay.
wanted the true reason why I wanted to do this book black and white is because
Cost effective.
so many people looked at me as the colorist and they never realized that I could also do interiors. And so for a while, you know, I was only getting hired color jobs. And that's fine with me, but I really wanted to do some penciling and inking. And then when people saw that, they're like, "Wait, two things. Nick drew that? And second of all, isn't Nick a colorist? Why is the book black and white?" And I'm like,
Right.
"You fell for my trap. You fool." But yeah,
Called
it
subversion.
yeah. So yeah, it was all diversion. But yeah, and then more people realized that, and then I got some cool cover gigs out of it. I got some small interior gigs with it as well. So now
Right.
people know that I don't just solely color. So
Right.
it definitely worked into my favor. And it kind of allowed me to um differentiate both books stylistically. So like Purity, like so Reign of Ages is definitely more in that cartoony Hernandez brother route bad girl book.
Right.
With Purity, it was more me in a sense of I definitely, and I'm notorious for wearing my influences on my sleeve.
Mhm.
Like it's definitely more 90s image. It's definitely more um coffin comics looking. But with that slight cartooniness to it. And it actually was the first book that I hired an inker, Fran Crivelli, and
Yep. Yep.
what I like how he what I like about his inks on my stuff is that he does give my stuff kind of like an animated feel, like it belongs. It's like a still from an animated series, and I
Right.
really like that a lot. And it brings my character to life. And yeah, it definitely like stylistically compared to Rain, you can notice small similarities.
Right.
But really, it, it Purity was like my time to really shine, and especially too
Right.
that was a full color book as well. So, and that's weirdly one thing weirdly I'm weird about. I don't like coloring over myself, but at the
Oh.
same time, I would feel weird if a colorist hires another colorist for their book, because you're
Right.
like, I literally could do this. This is what people hire me to do. But there's just something very weird in my mind that when I color over myself, like when I color over other people, fine. I adjust, I adapt to their style. But for some
Mm.
reason, when it comes to coloring myself, it's never right. Like it's
Oh.
never. It's not at the level where I'm like, this is great. I love coloring over myself
Right.
because there's always changes in style, or it's like I'm trying to figure out in my head. I'm like, how do I want my colors over my own stuff to look? So there's a
Right.
lot of different things that are happening.
Right. Yeah, and you've already covered like some of the questions I wanted to ask,
Oh,
like what you hope to see in comics, or what are you not seeing in comics that you want to portray through your own work. You said you wanted to add that cartoonish or that like anime element to the bad girl genre
hmm
through like Purity and Reign of Ages and whatnot.
yeah.
Um
I
but
think
I
what
want
kind of triggered that idea too, I'll be
uh
honest. I think especially like DC, they're a lot more open to like manga influences. Like if you look at like Jorge Jimenez's work, you could tell that kid
oh
grew up
yeah.
watching anime. And like
Yeah.
Serge Acuna, other people like Belen Ortega. And I remember as a kid, my middle school art teacher told me to stop drawing anime and manga because like I don't know if this was really like a racist thing they said, but they're like, they won't hire you because you don't live in Japan, you're not Japanese. They're like, you could just quit now because they're not gonna hire you. You're not gonna get work off of this. Just stop drawing anime and draw like you know draw like a recreation of like a Claude Monet painting or whatever.
Oh
And
geez.
I was like, all right. And then come 2 years later, A lot of high schools offer in their art department a manga program. And I see now a lot of artists, like you could tell by the eyes, the pointy faces, and like they watched anime growing up 100%. So it's really refreshing to see. But I feel like in the narrative of bad girl comics, I think it's time that's dabbled in that genre, because I feel like as much as I love the textbook style bad girl book, I feel like a lot of it's very samey now. And even with
Mm.
concepts, there are some books out there, and I could tell it's like more sex oriented, or like obviously you know what you're going in for. Like there's a book just solely about boobs, and there's no plot to it. There's no, and I guess I understand that's probably the purpose of the book, where the creator's well aware that the plot is just solely boob based. But
Yeah.
but like
Is
there's
that the
no
one that
growth.
is
What?
that the one that's just called boobs? Because I
Yeah.
remember seeing a Kickstarter that was just
Mm-hmm.
boobs.
Yep. And I mean, kudos to them if that funded, and great, you got the great cover lineup. But at the same time, you know, I why I think something like Lady Death really sets the bar for a lot of
Mhm.
bad girl creators is because you do have that sexy character, you do have the TNA, but you have a quality story and the character grows for decades. So
Right.
that's why I think that or Witchblade's successful, and I want to see
Right.
more of that in bad girl comics, because a lot of people just go in with the impression that I just need a sexy chick and like a few money shot panels in the book,
Right.
and then have like the highest talent do the covers. And I'm like, that's great and all, but there's no substance to your story.
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I wanted to actually get behind the story of purity itself,
Okay.
um, because we've talked around the situation of how you came to make it and your inspiration for it. But what is that story that you're offering that you don't see in other like bad girl books?
Um, there's a multitude of layers to it. Ideally, the theme of purity is revenge and redemption.
Hmm.
And it's kind of a weird, ironic, take if the character's name is Purity.
Yeah.
So really, it starts off um, in the 1600s, in the heat of the Salem witch trials, and
Hmm.
even growing up, I was a history buff as a kid, and that early American civilization really fascinated me. I really loved the Salem witch trials. I thought it was a very interesting time, because you could literally have a difference of opinion, and someone will be like, well, this person's a witch, so kill them, and they would.
Get them.
So get
Yeah.
them. So it starts off in there, and what we don't realize in the story is um, Margaret Adams, who is Purity,
Hmm.
was falsely accused of murdering a baby, Samuel Todd, and people framed her for being a witch, when in reality, her sister Mary is the actual witch, and she's in the opening sequence of watching her sister get hanged. And
Wow.
what people don't realize is that the sister performed this as part of a blood oath to Satan, and Satan granted her the gift of beauty and immortality. Um, and but it was like a two-part ritual. She had to kill the infant, but
Hmm.
why Purity went to the underworld instead of going to heaven, because she's innocent, was because the second part of the blood oath was her sister had to swap her soul with the soul of a pure virgin, and
Hmm.
that's why Purity went down under, because people would think immediately like, but she didn't do anything wrong and she's going to the underworld. I'm like, well, there's a reason behind it. And then
Right.
she was enslaved for 500 or so years, and she
Dang.
kind of formed this persona down under, and uh she was named Purity because she would still help people down under, and like help them like tend to their injuries or make their workload a little lighter. She always cared for others before herself. And then she started being in the underworld for so long, she started changing her looks, her skin started turning slightly green, she
Hold
started
on one
learning.
second. Nico, show my screen here.
Oh, okay. That one? The one with the... There we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sweet.
And I'll just scroll through while you discuss.
So so she realizes Hell kind of, even though she's maintaining that level of pureness, and even says in the comic that she needs to be the hope that's down here, and she has to believe there's hope. And with that said, she still can't forgive the fact that her sister betrayed her, and she realizes why she's down under, and she wants to go back up, Little Nicky style, and reclaim her sister, and in hopes of perhaps swapping the soul and bringing the rightful soul down to the underworld, and she would do whatever it takes. And so she escapes hell, and she finds herself in a new world. It's Salem 2096. And
2090s. Oh wow.
yeah, but what she doesn't realize, and this causes a big issue, by leaving the gates of hell, no one ever pulled that stunt before. But since she's such a pure soul, she froze the gates of hell, so Satan can't reclaim any new souls. So it's going to affect her power source. So she sends bounty hunters up there. She sends like all these obstacles to get purity, and that's the whole theme of Purity issue 2, the hunt, because purity is on the hunt while being hunted. So it's kind of a fun tale, but really what I want people to get out of Purity in comparison to a lot of different bad girl books is that the character growth, the world building, the TNA is there, the sexiness is there, but I want people to um, love this character, and almost and I know I'm gonna sound, and I've said this before to people, but I know I'm gonna sound pretentious when I say this, but I wanted, when I was talking to my editors for this book, I told them specifically I want the Witchblade treatment. So what does that mean? I want an ongoing series. I want one shots. I want a graphic novel. I want an action figure. I want that. That's really what I want out of Purity, to be the newest, and it's kind of like her phrase in the first campaign, whereas the newest bad girl on the block. That's how I pitched it to people.
Nice.
But ideally, I want this whole thing, and even maybe down the road, who knows? Maybe there's a medieval Purity, because I know there was a time period, I think, like early 2000s, there was a time period where there was like a medieval everything, medieval Witchblade, medieval Lady Death, medieval, like there were so many medieval versions of characters, which is kind of cool. But regardless, I think ultimately I want people to realize that this book obviously is a passion of mine since I was 14 years old. I made this character, but
Oh, okay.
but it really is a nod to the greats. The nod, like I want to take all the qualities of a good bad girl book, make it something even bigger, but still respectfully revering and respecting the source it came from, and really acknowledging that this book wouldn't have been made possible without Lady Death or Witchblade or She or Tara, Witch of the Black Rose. Like it almost kind of invites a new audience to that genre.
Right.
Gotcha.
So, Nico, did you have any?
No, I was just gonna say, because I mean, when you were doing Reign of Ages, did you kind of pick up a lot of the things, a lot of processing things and a lot of like story things that you weren't really able to kind of develop during that project, and that kind of carried over into your creation of Purity? Like,
Yeah.
was Reign kind of like those boots on the ground, learning everything, learning how to get that idea out there, and then like just made purity that much more pure, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I got, and I love working on Rain. I think I got a little like I got some of those kinks out though. Like, you
Yeah.
know, I was going in. As weird as it sounds, going into the bad girl industry really isn't a risk because it is a profitable genre in comics.
It indeed
Um,
is.
but the risk I will say was going in with a completely different style and a completely different tone.
Mm,
There's comedy in Rain. There is action. There is levels of sexiness in Rain, but not like nowhere near say the general bad girl book, and that
right,
was kind of agreed upon with the writer. And it was kind of we wanted to go down that route with Rain, whereas with Purity, completely different tone, darker tone. Um, uh, the way, and I think also it factors into the idea that I write Purity. So I look at it in the mindset, and I said this when I announced Purity issue 1 was with Purity, I didn't want to hold back. So, you know, you're getting hell, you're getting the underworld. I'm not
right,
sugarcoating that. There are people hanging, there are people getting lashed, there are people getting impaled, stabbed. It's a bloodbath. Like, I didn't want to hold back. And I think that's, we'll call it shock value, but that's something you don't see much in bad girl books a lot anymore.
right,
So I knew um, Rain was definitely coming from a lighter place, whereas Purity is
right.
from a pure dark realm. And so it definitely opened a lot of doors for me to like play with those and challenge those themes.
Uh, yeah, I wanted to ask, have you ever read Adam Warren's Empowered?
I actually I have it somewhere, but I wait, it's right here.
Dope.
Wait, is that the same one or
No,
is it a
that's
different
number
one?
2.
Oh, nice. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
also a QB. He went to this. I think he only went for 1 year though, but
Yeah, he was there.
yeah, really cool dude. It was I was doing I did for this company called Pixie Tricks Comics, and there was a art book for one of their books, and it was printed through Udon, and
Nice.
my one of my pieces was next to an Adam Warren piece, and I told Giselle Agassi, who is the creator of the book, I'm like, you have no idea how much of an honor that is. That like my work raced next to Adam Warren, and I'm like, "You don't understand. Like, that's awesome." But, yeah, no, I am a fan of Empowered, and what I like about Empowered too is that it does have that element of sexiness, but there's that comedy, it's lighthearted,
Yeah,
but it, like, when it
it's,
gets
like, really
violent, it gets
funny.
violent. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She's, like, this super strong girl, but her outfit, like, you just, like, punch her in the stomach, and her whole costume just goes
Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah.
But it's got that anime element, and it's like a really, it's also a really deep story, like, it's just solid all around.
Yeah. And like I said, I think some people when they think of bad girl books, they don't think that you can really come up with a solid story. They think it's purely marketing and, you know, tits. But
Right.
but really you can because you look at Empowered or like I said, I reference a lot of Lady Death, and it's because Lady Death really set the bar, and ask any bad girl artist and they will say that Lady Death set the bar. Like if anyone's familiar with how Coffin Comics sells on Kickstarter, on the low end, their Kickstarter for a single issue funds 400 grand. The highest I've seen a Kickstarter of theirs fund, I think it was like pushing 700 grand. They like broke a
Yeah,
record. But
yeah,
Lady Death is notorious for uh the Kickstarters.
right,
Like Brian's known for, and people look at Brian as like kind of like a formula to how they market their Kickstarters. Um,
definitely.
but yeah, like the proof really is in the pudding. Like, yeah, there's sex and TNA, but there's also other qualities that keep those fans coming back, and that's kind of
Yep.
like what I want with Purity.
Yeah.
So with Purity, do you want it to be like your franchise, like Lady Death is? And
Mhm.
then what would you say is your ultimate goal in comics? Like, what are you trying to end up? Like, are you trying to end up in the, like, I guess the Brian Pulido situation where you just have a regularly occurring comic book that you can put out and you have a like sustainable revenue source? What's your goals in this industry?
My goal really is like the Brian Pulido approach. I do want I want to get involved in. I knew like at a very young age. I at the time I was like, I don't care what I did as long as it involved comics. As long
Right.
as in the industry in some way, whether if it was production, lettering, penciling, inking, coloring, I just want to be in the vicinity of comics. But
Yeah.
later on, when I started to create different ideas and um, different characters, especially with Purity, I realized that there is that level of opportunity down the road that you can achieve, where you're that you're not only making profits solely off of your own creation, but you realize that there's a huge following to your creation. And
Right.
that to me just speaks values. Like I can only imagine how unreal that feeling is, that like people funded like 100 grand on a book that's your character. There's no Spider-Man, there's no Batman, there's no
Yeah.
partnership with Marvel. It's solely yours, and people like flocked at your table at conventions, and they're like mobbing your table, and that to me is my end goal. The fact that like I said, Brian, like I said, his presence alone, like I don't know if you guys realize this. There's a convention for Coffin Comics called Sworn Fest,
Oh
and
wow.
it's a huge convention that
Mhm.
Brian Pulido throws, where all Coffin artists go there. A lot of people attend it. It's a well attended show in
Wow.
Arizona,
Uh-huh.
and that is like next level. And I look at other creators, and like even someone like Love and Rockets, like the Hernandez brothers formed a
Mhm.
legacy. Like my goal is to form a legacy. I want a character that people are gonna love, and pretty much I could slab on anything and they'll buy it. I could make like Purity bookmarks and they'll be like sold out. Or one thing I'm very adamant on, and I kind of scheduled this already, is like my big 10-year plan. Uh, I want that action figure. Granted, it's very expensive to make action figures, but um, I saw at a convention, and by no means do I support this person. I don't like this person relatively. I don't go by their politic, but I was tabled at a show adjacent to Ethan Van Sciver.
All right.
And the one thing I did notice, he had Cyberfrog action figures.
Oh yeah.
And like I said, I don't really agree with him.
But those figures
But
are dope.
his figures are, I that like that, but I was like, those are nice figures. And
Yeah.
the one thing I like about it is I have an example here. Um, this is like an old, I was in like Florida visiting my dad, and I went to a
Oh,
local
dope.
comic shop, and they had old action figures. This is from a Bad Girl book called Helena. Um, Now, what I like about this style that I want to bring back for the Purity action figure is I
Uh-huh.
like the cardboard backing with the plastic front. I love the art. And like even as a
Right.
kid, that's really what drew me into action figures in the 90s, was you had art on the front and the back. And I
Yeah.
really wanted to do that. So like that's like my 10-year goal.
You
I'm
like
doing more research.
save the cardboard, cut it out, and like
Mhm.
put it up on your wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there are times I was tempted to open this, but I'm like, "I can't open this." I also have, it's downstairs, but I have a medieval Witchblade action figure that was gifted to me, and, like,
Nice.
that's another one where I'm like, "I can't open it because I don't wanna ruin the art." But,
Right.
yeah, ultimately, my goal is to have, like, the action figure. I want the statues. It's not an original idea, but it's definitely, I feel, a fulfilling idea. I feel having those novelties, knowing that they exist, uh,
Yeah.
would just mean the world to me. I'll be on cloud 9, and that's when I would be like, I made it, because
Yeah.
to have a character start from like a no name and in competition to the big two, Marvel, DC, like the fact that there's a market for your character alone is just the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be incredible, dude.
That's a great dream.
I got maybe one more question for you
Yeah, to
before we
wrap up.
kind of wrap up.
Sure.
So I mean, Nick, we hear everybody say it. We hear so many things about it, about like the comic industry dying and everything, right? And we've been hearing that for years and years and years. You've got a gig at the Kubert School. You're doing a bunch of freelance art. You're doing your own books. You're doing this and that. What's kind of your take on that, man? For all the viewers and Ken and I.
My take: comics are not dying. I look at it in a sense that uh, the idea that storytelling is still being told, is still a prominent source of entertainment, a prominent source of, you know, what people buy. That's really what matters, because I think the narrative to a few people is that, uh-oh, manga is outselling American comics. And you know what? To be fair, it might seem like that because take a look at X-Men. X-Men has become unreadable in the past 10 years because if I was a kid, I can't just walk in and pick up an X-Men graphic novel,
Jonathan
Right.
Hickman
because in
was
Yeah.
for the
order to,
kids, man.
yeah, because in order to understand that graphic novel, you had to read 5 different series, where
Mm.
manga, you start at volume 1. And that's why I think people enjoy manga these days over mainstream comics, is because I feel certain comics complicate things. You can't just pick up whatever you find, and it becomes
Right.
hard, and it kind of allows people to feel discouraged. I'm like, well, maybe I just won't read it. Um, Not that every comic's like that, but ideally, I look at it in a sense of comic books aren't dying. It's just how you look at it. Look at it in the way of storytelling is still prominent. People are buying narrative art is still a big thing.
Mhm.
Look at the Marvel movies, look at video games. There's a narrative standpoint to it. So, in a sense, for comics, it's not going anywhere. People see that their local comic book shop closes down and they all panic like it's, the beginning of a like world-ending thing. And I think it's the complete opposite because, I look at it also in a way of they fear that the bigger markets are offering their products. So like Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and they would rather go there than a comic shop. But I'm like, but comics are still being sold. That's that's the thing you don't realize, is that
Mm.
comics are still being sold. Sure, it might be hard to find issue whatever from 1975, but you know, ask any little kid out there and ask them if they're interested in reading Neil Adams's Batman run. They probably were like, "No, I want to read Batman the animated series. I don't want to read like old comics." And it's it's a weird narrative to say, and they might grow into loving the old Batman stuff, but like especially looking at it from the perspective of a kid. I remember as a kid I loved Power Pack, like Marvel's Power Pack, because it was geared towards kids. But like, I didn't want to read Civil War. I didn't want to read like Days of Future Past. I was like, my mindset wasn't strong enough to understand the events that happened in those books. But
Right.
but I still love the comic book medium. And I think that's what people need to realize, is that comics are not dying. It's just how you look at it, because the people, there's still a market. People are still buying it. Book publishers are now diving into comics like Penguin, Random House. It's not like your main source of comics isn't just at your local comic shop. Now even with the digital age, people
Right.
are making a profit off of comics like Laura Olympus. Say what you want about the art style, but she made a profit off of Laura Olympus, her own comic.
Right.
So I kind of, the way I view it, I look at it with a very open mind, and I think I think the fact that I do have a background in being a fan of manga and anime growing up balances that
Mhm.
out. Um, I really, I'll tell you the truth, I can care less about the old school classic comics. The art's very stiff to me. Some of the stories are very cheesy. Like I respect it. Don't get me wrong. I respect the old uh, narrative, but at the same time, um, it never really did it for me. It like
Right.
with the exception of like a few like X stories, like I loved the Phoenix Saga. I loved Nightfall, all like old like
Right.
those stories I loved. But you know, I just also the one thing I do respect with manga too is that they have so many ideas. They're not restricted into like the superhero bubble. They like
Right.
it allows people to read more slice of life stuff, and it allows people to realize that, it's not always caped crusaders and like super teams. Like you could read a high fantasy comic. You could read there's a little bit of like of everything. And I think that's why I like manga. But ultimately comics aren't dying. Storytelling is still prevalent, and I think people love to overreact over that. I still get hired for work. I still like there are people still doing uh jobs like work in comics. Like it's not no one's putting their boxing gloves up and hanging them up. Like people and I'll tell you the truth. Someone made a good point about this. I watched if you're familiar with Tyler Carpenter or
Oh
Tyler
yeah,
Draw
draw
and
and talk.
Talk,
Yeah.
yeah, he said something very interesting. I know he's a very polarizing figure, especially on Twitter, but he said
Oh yeah.
something very interesting, and it's because he said that the people who claim comics are dying are the older generation, the boomers, the ones who grew
Mm.
up with like the typical like old school comics that were like 60 cents at their local candy store.
Mhm.
It's just different now. Like it like
Yeah.
you got to realize that like the main consent like Marvel and DC, their target audience isn't like a 60-year-old man. It's probably young adult, like teenage little
Right.
kids. So you got to realize that, but they should be I think the older generation's more gatekeepy, and they can't accept the fact that the industry is trying to appeal to a newer generation,
Mhm.
and that should be enough. That should be, well, at least my kid is reading comics. That's an amazing thing. They were like, no, they must read Neil Adams' Batman because I read that. And like they get pissy about, oh, like they don't like this cartoony approach and how they like under sexualize the characters. I'm like, because it's not for you. And I think the older generation fears that comics is dying because of those reasons, is because they can't accept change. Like comics isn't going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. But
Right.
like I said, I think ultimately it's just how you look at it. I if you look at it
Right.
with an open mind, you realize that comics isn't there's a place for comics always.
Right.
If you have more of that old school gatekeeping approach, um, you might think to yourself that comics is going to be a dying medium, but really it's not.
Right.
Yeah, and like, to your point, like I don't think younger kids are really into the superhero stuff so much anymore. I mean, I'm just looking at like my niece and nephew for Christmas. I have the Great Fire of Chicago in 1870, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's and they're dude, they consume these things quick, man, and they love it. I just don't think I don't know how the superhero industry is going to continue to develop because I don't know if kids are even really care about that stuff anymore.
Yeah, I I
I don't
think
know.
I think the problem with superhero genre is that it's too oversaturated. Um, I think that's why I've personally gotten so bored over like Marvel movies and just superhero movies is because it's all the same. It's very formulated. Like, like Superman, for example, like biting my tongue if Anthony's watching this because he's a big Superman fan. But like I'm tired of like the Boy Scout characters, but also I'm kind of tired of the edgy superheroes. Like I think just the idea of a superhero is starting to just get a little boring to me. And I was a huge fantasy buff growing up. So,
Mhm.
Lord of the Rings, Dungeons and Dragons, like the fact that they make comics now that cater to those genres, I prefer reading that. Like Red Sonja, I love obviously Lady Death, but a lot of the manga I read is pretty high fantasy. Like I've been reading Claymore lately.
Oh, really?
Really really awesome stuff. But I love those genres. Like the superhero teams were fine like for a while. And I even respect, it being in the manga scene. I do like One Punch Man and I love
Mm,
the art for it, but I think at a certain point it just doesn't do it for me. Like they could hype up all the new team ups and everything, but it really comes down to like it doesn't do much. And it
Yeah.
kind of feels like the big two especially, it's almost like they're just running out of ideas. And I think the problem
right.
with that is these characters have been going on for like 80 plus years. So there's only so many times they could go stop a bank robber or stop the big bad. Like I think that's why
Right.
people get tired of superhero stuff is because it's all relatively the same. And I think it wasn't up until maybe like the last 20 years where they started diving into the psyche of the characters and realizing the psychological end of like the toll of being a superhero is. And
Right.
like that was interesting. Like I do think The Boys is kind of interesting to watch.
I like the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, because it like
Yeah.
dives
Show's
into
good.
the idea of like superheroes can never work in real life because they would become these overpowered monsters and like they become ungovernable and they'll just wipe out the entire planet if people it doesn't go their way.
Yeah.
Right.
So it just but I think ultimately, like I said, uh superhero genre I think started just to bore me. I think it really I lost interest probably after the first wave of Marvel movies, like after the first 3 Iron Man movies, I was like, "I'm done." Like
Yeah.
like I don't if I never have to see another Marvel movie again, I'm totally cool with that.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, I'm still sad about, like, Vertigo disbanding because I mean, I felt like, that was kind of a subsection of DC that was consistently fresh, because they weren't tied down to Gotham City, they weren't tied down to Metropolis, they could kinda introduce any new character, and then, maybe those could cross over with, superhero characters, whatever, but it never had to, so but I know that there are
Yeah.
rumors that maybe Vertigo may be coming back at some point. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I miss Vertigo.
Yeah, no,
Right.
Vertigo is good.
DC
Yeah.
DC Black Label just not cutting it for me, man. It's just
Yeah,
Right.
it's
not
just
doing it.
it
Uh,
like
let me just say one thing on the point of superheroes is like I think in this situation like comics are just like in a flux. Like I wouldn't say they're dying. And then like superheroes, they're I think they're trying so many different things to try to grab more of an audience into like trying to revive the medium that it's kind of awkward. Like they're that in that awkward middle phase before they find their footing again. So
I
that's
agree.
what I think about like superheroes, like and why people might have that fatigue because maybe they're not putting enough of a twist on the formula to really bring in that new crowd.
Yeah.
I agree. I feel like I feel like a lot of the time they typically play it safe. And I think
Yeah,
that's why it doesn't like kick off. It doesn't uh become something is because a lot of the time, especially with Marvel, they play it safe with almost all of their titles.
right.
Like nothing really is new and inventive. And then now with the movies, they're like, oh, why don't we tie in, some stuff from the movies and make it a book? And I'm like, they make like a mini series off of a non-important character of the movie, and I'm like, You're not gonna grab people. You're not gonna draw people in. They're gonna be like, this is, and then I think it also
Well,
comes down to the point of even artistically, depending
uh,
on the talent that you have on the book, could really make or break the book.
right.
hmm
Yeah.
Well,
Cool.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Nick, I think we were almost coming up on an hour and a half here.
Wow.
This has been a great discussion, dude. We appreciate
Yeah,
you
man.
joining the
Yeah.
show, man.
Thank you for having me. This was a lot of
Yeah.
fun. Like
Yeah.
seriously, this like was the fastest hour and a half I've ever experienced. Like this is like, it was a lot of fun because I'm like, did not feel like an hour and a half.
Right.
That's good, man. That's good.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't like grueling to get through for you.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no. Like it was really, I really appreciate you guys because like I've been on like quite a few podcasts and there are some times where you just kind of like sit there like an NPC and just like kind of wait your turn, and there are some that like you really don't have an answer for, and you just sit there kind of awkwardly and trying to come up with something, but like you guys ask like really engaging questions and really good questions, and I always
Awesome. Man.
appreciate that. And like I said, that last question was really good because it is a prominent thing and that people worry is that the future of comics, and I'm like, it's not going anywhere, and that's always a very good discussion to have because
Yeah.
it ensures to people that nope, they're not going anywhere.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
hmm
For sure, man. Go ahead and tell the good people out there where they can follow your work, Nick. Where can they, do you have a Kickstarter going on, a Kickstarter coming up, anything like that? Let them know.
Okay. Well, I am launching issue 2 of Purity, The Hunt Part 1 in March. The exact date will be unveiled
Nico,
next
share
month.
my.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Share the screen for you.
yep. So, but you can find me on Instagram, Nick Caponi Art. My Twitter or X handle, whichever you call it, is the same. I'm pretty I'm pretty active on both of those, mostly Instagram, but I keep you up to date. That's the cover for issue 2 of Purity.
Nice.
We got a nice view of Satan in the back. But yeah, so we're launching that in March. I am unveiling a couple covers. The next cover I'm going to be unveiling tomorrow, and if
Dope.
especially if you grew up reading a lot of '90s stuff, especially Rob Liefeld titles, you might like this artist that did the cover for the next issue. Um,
Nice.
yeah. So
Is it Rob Liefeld himself?
no,
Imagine.
I I you know what? I wish because I'm a
Rob.
Rob Liefeld apologist. In a sense of I know his art is his art, but I still like it. I still have a soft spot for him, but no, it's actually he worked on, if you're familiar with Rob's title Evangeline,
Okay.
he was the main artist for that for a while. His name's John Stinsman, and
Sweet.
yeah,
Nice.
he did a cover for Purity, so I'm going to be unveiling that tomorrow. That cover is by Fabio Simeo. He does a lot of bad girl books for Max DeVille and Atrocity Press. He's a really awesome guy. But yeah, that's some of my stuff on there. I do have a balance of my color work and also my illustrations. As you can see, I so like that cover I colored for Justin Hunt for his book Ninja Witch, issue
Nice.
2, and I'm gonna be coloring the interiors for issue 3 come this year. And yeah, that's some more Ninja Witch stuff I've colored. Other things too,
Awesome.
like the majority of my Purity covers, with the exception of like a couple, I like to color most of the Purity covers. I just think there's just fun in that, and plus I could say that, especially depending who I get to color, who does a cover for Purity, I could say that I colored over that person, which is always a fun
Nice.
thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could find me on Instagram. You could find me on Twitter. Um, if I'm always open for commissions, even though I'm very busy. So feel free to DM me on any of those platforms. And if you're interested in collaborating, whether for colors, covers, interiors, you name it. And then you could also find me. I will be at Garden State Comic Fest end of January, July 27th to 28th. And then the following week, for you Floridians out there, I will be tabling at the Kubert School booth at MegaCon Orlando, which is only a few short days after Garden State Comic Fest. And then the next show I'll be after that, I believe, would be Fan Expo Philly, and I'll be tabling there for myself.
Dope.
Nice, good stuff, man. Sounds like you
Thank
got a nice year ahead of you, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying.
Full schedule.
Yeah, thank you.
How about you, Ken? Where can everybody find you?
Oh, everyone can find me at thecomicsgrind on Twitter, and then also at comicsgrind on Instagram. And you guys can read my webcomic Air Rider High School Hero on Global Comics. It'll also be linked into the description for the newsletter download as well. And yeah, that's pretty much where y'all can find me.
Awesome. And you guys can find me at Nico_writes on Instagram and on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. You can also follow me and subscribe to my Substack for free at nicorodriguez.substack.com. I'm serializing my comedy book called Brew Monsters, about monsters who open up a brewery in Transylvania. New pages every Friday, so check it out. It's all for free, so do it, join it. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Nick, thank you so much, and we will see everyone next time.
All right, later, guys. Thank you.